There's another thing that people need to be aware of, that what they're searching for, and we talked about it early on in the show. We talked about them searching for particles, and there's a specific one that they're searching for. And this is called the Atman particle, or the Atma particle. And it's talked about in, if you haven't guessed it, the Upanishads and the Vedas. And it is a very, very interesting particle. It's invisible. Even though they're going subatomic, they can't detect this particle. It's that hard to find. And it is a particle that they believe goes to the core of establishing godhood. So this Atma particle, it's rather interesting. It's invisible, but what it does do is it merges with particles that they can measure. And they believe that this is the particle that has the main essence of man in it, or what man can become. They believe that it is the knowledge of the universe that is accessed through this particle, and this knowledge through quantum entanglement is instantaneously sent around the whole physical universe ongoing, and they're trying to find this particle to tap into.
The history of our Earth is so different from what we can imagine.
Enjoy the journey.
The Smithsonian, if they found out about a large skeleton somewhere, was to go get it.
I'm going to assume at least one person is right, because if one person's right, it busts the paradigm.
It all goes back to the fallen cherub. And the problem with the modern day church, they have a very truncated view of the supernatural.
This backdrop that's just pregnant with all kinds of meaning associated with this Mount Hermon event.
Welcome to Blurry Creatures.
And this guy defects from the kingdom. That's a big deal.
Welcome back to Blurry Creatures, the never-ending dive into the ancient world, trying to figure out what's going on around us.
Into the weird, weirder, and even weirder than that.
Yeah, we're bringing on the encyclopedia, the myth, the man, the legend himself, Gary Wayne today. He knows a lot of facts and a lot of names and a lot of places, and sometimes you're like, wait a minute, I need to Google that, I need to Google that, I need to Google that.
There's a few people we have on the show that are like walking encyclopedias, you know.
He's one of them.
Dr. Judd Burton, Derek Gilbert, like the first to come on top of my head that just can rattle things off.
Tim.
Yeah, I mean,
that's why we say we're two dummies.
Yeah, we get to sit and absorb some of this, and it's really fun. So
yeah,
great to have Gary Wayne back, of course, author of the Genesis 6 conspiracy theory. We've had him on the show a couple times. He's returning for a third time. And Nate, we're going to talk about
Cern. That's right. We talked about it a little bit here and there, but we're going to dive into it again, and we're going to give you more of a historical context to how it sprung up, its roots back to Buddhism, other crazy things.
So the Vedas and the mystery Babylon, the seven sacred sciences, and all the way back to the Watchers.
Yeah, which is just what we talk about on our show. Yeah, outside of it all, we love it. Thank you for listening to our podcast, and thank you for supporting our podcast, sharing our podcast on social media. A lot of people have been sharing our memes on their Instagram reels, and that's just amazing. Anyone who shares our show, texts it to a friend, leaves a review, we can't say thank you enough. And also just takes some time to give a shout out to all the members of our show, people who sponsor the show every month and make this possible and allow Luke and I to spend hours and hours and hours every week producing, recording, promoting the shows. So members are the best. Thank you so much. Appreciate you guys. If you want to become a member, how do you do that, Luke?
Go to our website. There's actually a little button that says join or become a member, and you just click on that. Nate made a great video. People, you might not know this out there, but you know, Nate is the whiz behind all the editing here and the splicing of all the 80s amazingness together. But Nate's actually originally a video guy, so you know, if you follow our social media, you don't get on it. Go to our Instagram page, because Nate puts together some amazing video. I'll just say there's a video that talks about what you get alongside a membership and alongside supporting the show. what comes along with that. So take a look at that. It'll tell you how to do it. It's a video by dummies meant to show you how if you were a dummy, how to join. Not that everyone's a dummy, but we are. Check it out. If you are a member, thank you. And we're going to roll that time cop, and we're going to bring on Gary Wayne.
No, you're now entering
the Bone Zone.
The Blurryverse. Let's get Gary on the show.
Welcome back to the show. Welcome back to Blurry Creatures. Gary Wayne, author of the Genesis 6 Conspiracy. You've been on the show a couple times. Thanks for coming back on. Last time we talked, you said you were writing a Giants book, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about that specifically, but appreciate you coming back on Blurry Creatures.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me back. And I think I wrote almost my last lines to the last chapter. Of course, the last chapter is a little bit longer than I anticipated, so it's probably going to be like 3 chapters or 4 when I split it up. But it's going to be somewhere between chapter 81 and 83 will be the end of the book. So it's as I had promised to be smaller than the first book. I just didn't say how much smaller. So it's not a whole lot smaller.
Count those words, Gary. Count those words. Yeah.
You've been on the show before, so you might know what we talk about a lot about Bigfoot on our show.
Yeah.
Did you discover anything new about Bigfoot while writing this book?
I wasn't really getting into the Nephilim or the Bigfoot or Sasquatch or Yeti sort of aspect of it. So that's kind of a future book that I was going to put in maybe different kinds of the Nephilim and stuff like that, but that's not really the theme of this book, although I'll touch on it just here or there. I need to group that with all the different sort of looks to these kind of creations that are out there, right? So, there's more than just what I think that the Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Yeti are related within the larger group of Nephilim creation, a similar kind of creation, I think, perhaps even going back to some specific gods, which is really sort of gets my attention. But there's like the dog Nephilim. There are the lion Nephilim. Mm-hmm. There are the bird Nephilim. And of course, the serpent Nephilim that I tend to talk mostly about. And then there's other creations too. There's the little ones that we did a show on. So I think I want to package that maybe all in sort of a specific book. This one here is about giants. It's going to be Genesis 6 Conspiracy Part 2. And it's going to have a subtitle, something like Prehistory and Prophecy. It'll be a little bit longer than that because they always want to say how this helps with this or does that. So there'll be more of a statement for the subtitle. So it goes really deep into fallen angels. It goes really deep into everything it says in the Bible about giants. It goes really deep into the patriarchless nations, which have Rephaim patriarchs. It goes into the battles of what I call the Nephilim Wars or the Rephaim Wars that happen after the flood. And there's many, including the ones in the Exodus and beyond. And all the way through, I'm connecting that into end time prophecy. And then the last half of the book is talking about end time prophecy and being defined by all of those imageries and things that I was discussing in the first part of the book about prehistory with giants and things like that. So, and the abyss, which we'll probably talk a little bit about today.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hey, Gary, wait real quick. When is the book? Do you know when the book's coming out? Do you have a date for it?
No, I don't, because I still have to go through and edit it myself and do some connecting of it. I would like to have it out early in the year, but I'm not convinced I'll hit the publisher's deadlines. So typically, they're out 3 months minimum in advance from receiving the manuscript to doing everything that they need to do to get it out. So, but I'm my own worst enemy on it. I just kept adding more and more and more stuff. So.
When it does come out, Gary, we'd love to have you on. Talk about the new book and
absolutely. So
we can unwrap some of these rabbit holes that I know.
We're
already teasing it hard here. It's like, man, let's talk about that. But it's not what we're here for today.
I know. I was going to say we tried to do an episode on the Nephilim Wars, And
it's too big. It's too big of a subject.
Yeah, they're rumored to be pretty massive wars between these tribes, and
yeah,
I can't imagine what life was actually like back then. But today we're talking about Cern. Thanks for coming back on the show again. And how do you begin the conversation with Cern when you talk about it? Where do you start?
Well, that's a really good question in itself, because it's a very large topic as well. I know I tend to make everything very large topics, but really when you dig in and get behind the onion and peel it back, there's a lot in there. And I know you've done a show on CERN. I'm not sure exactly what's been covered, but I'll just maybe sort of preface it with what I think are areas that are all interconnected and related, but all sort of go into sort of different sort of directions in terms of their history and stuff like that. So,
yeah,
obviously, when people talk about CERN, it's like, what does the name mean? And so within CERN, you've got a certain imagery that goes with it. And you've got all of these allegories, and you got things like, what is the name CERN? And you've got the imagery of Shiva and Atlas program and all of those things. You've got a power base that's in CERN as being a very powerful organization that's connected into the UN, and they have a specific dogma and agenda that they have that's quite public. You have a merging of technologies there, all sorts of physics and science, but specifically what intrigues me is the AI and the quantum computing that merges. You've got a history of quantum computing that most people don't know about, where most of the original scientists in quantum mechanics got most of their information from and what they build on and what they believe you need to know. There is the connection back to Babel and portals in the occult. You have this notion of what might they be looking for when they're trying to break down particle girls, or what else are they doing? And then you've got connections to the abyss, which is sort of in the mix within the imagery and within perhaps some of the science that they're doing. So you've got all of those sort of different areas that go into CERN. And I'm not sure where you'd like to start, but typically, I kind of like to talk just a little bit more about its place in the world and sort of back my way into some of this stuff, unless there's some areas where you think that you want to start first, because I can go back and forth pretty easily.
Yeah, let's go, Gary. Take us down the rabbit hole.
Yeah. So, one of the things that people don't know about CERN is it's sort of renowned as the birthplace for the World Wide Web in 1990 and connected to Tim Berners-Lee. And its connection to that high-tech part of this sort of new age is something that people don't know that it has this history. So it's tied into the world that they've been creating, and it is continuing to work in that direction in terms of how they're going to dominate and populate this new digital subatomic world and what they plan to sort of introduce. So I just thought I'd let people know about that. And, they're kind of famous for their web pages as being sort of hypertext media. So you can imagine their connections that would go into medias and other sort of cabals of secret societies and things as you sort of pull that back into the secret societies aspect. But one of these things that really sort of tweaked my interest early on is that they have UN observing status, which is most unusual. There's another group that's not a country that has that sort of status, and that's the Knights of St. John. And so it's not, and it's the only two that I'm aware of. There may be more, but it's the only two that I'm aware of. So I have the right to speak at the General Assembly and during debates. They have the right to sign in on resolutions and vote on procedural matters. And they have a right to sign as signatories on working papers. So this is not just one individual. This is an organization that's behind it. And there's a lot of funding that sort of goes behind it. And CERN believes in their dogma is that science is a vehicle for social change, just as they were one of the big proponents of making the internet more worldwide, not inventing it, because unless they were working with the U.S. and the U.S. Army, then, and I don't have anything on a status to say that they were in on that. But
didn't Al Gore invent the internet? Yeah. So
well, there you go. Right. That's true. He trumped that whole sort of science, so to speak. So they believe it's a social vehicle for social change, and the things that they like to focus on in their sort of virtual signaling and changing the world is the refugee crisis, gender equality. They believe believe in stem cell science and technology and really promote that sort of stuff, and also engineering and math. They're at the forefront of science in Europe, but I think they're probably at the forefront of science with their branches and their connections all around the world. Cern partners with companies to get its technology into the marketplace, and people don't know that. They're inventing and doing things and getting that new technology out through oligarchical companies all around the world. And they put license agreements in places on this technology. So they're getting significant revenue to continue to fund this massive set of projects they're doing. And they do something that's called KT groups, which is groups of knowledge and technology for the development of these things. But KT is a typical secret society term that's used in the Masonic Society, and it's short for Knights Templar. So again, you get these sort of eerie connections. But if you understand that secret societies were born from the 7 sacred sciences, and that the mystery schools and secret societies are all part of the same sort of organizational structure, they're creating this knowledge from the past. So they're trying to be like the days of Noah. So it starts to come a little bit together, but I thought it was good to understand a little bit of the grander sort of agenda that they have. And CERN uses something called a hadron collector to search for new and unknown cosmic particles. Specifically, they like to look at things like in dark matter, but there's photons and things like that. But it's this idea that they're looking for particles. And, I noticed in the news lately that they've announced that they've found a few new particles out there. Nothing that they're announcing that's significant, but just as when people talk about, the God particle and things like that, the Hoson particle, that's also that they're apparently sort of looking for or working on. These ones are a little bit different. They're called pentaquark, which are sort of single particles, and tetraquarks, which are pairs and particles. Those aren't the ones that they're looking for, but they're sort of looking continually for these types of particles. And they're looking for elementary particles, I guess is what I'm saying. And they're using induced quantum energy to do that. So let's just sort of back up a little bit in terms of the technology that they're using. And I'm going to start in here because I think this is really going to start to make some of the other stuff that I'll talk about make a little bit more sense. So if you go back, you've got quantum computing, quantum history, and essentially that's kind of done by, began by a pioneer by the name of Wolfgang Pauli. And he saw his search through the occult side of things. He was also a proponent of Carl Jung and sort of adopted a number of his philosophies, alchemy, and Eastern religions in particular. And so he was the one that started beginning this whole process of trying to unravel what is quantum math, and that led into quantum physics and then quantum computing. And then with quantum physics, you have people like Niels Bohr, who also consulted the Vedas. You have Werner Heisenberg, who also was into the Vedas and the Upanishads. And they thought quantum physics was perfectly consistent with what was written in the Vedas. And that you've also got another fellow by the name of Schrödinger, and he believed that quantum physics and the Upanishads were sort of united in that it reflected a unity, that both reflected a unity in wave mechanics and particles in terms of what they were talking about. And the key point is that the pioneers believed that you couldn't get your head around figuring out quantum mechanics unless you understood the Vedas. And they also believed, as an extension that came out of this, and this has been really popularized in the last number of years, is that, the universe is thought in this sort of understanding is like a quantum computer, like the Matrix is the common sort of ideology, which is a typical sort of occult ideology, and that there are multiple dimensions. And the Upanishads particularly talk about all of these particular dimensions. And so you have this occult history that is married into what's going on at CERN with a lot of its occult imagery. So that's not a surprise, particularly when you look at maybe Shiva. Yeah. You also have AI that is being merged there and in a few other places around the world, and it's probably growing sort of as we go. But AI is a different sort of technology as well. And problem with quantum computing is it's sort of single shot for the most part, unless the new technology has advanced it. AI allows it to search in many directions at the same time, in many dimensions at the same time. So it's something that they need to sort of speed up the process. And the whole idea about adding AI into the mix is that AI represents a consciousness. It represents something that's going to be sentient sort of down the road. May not be today, might be today, but it certainly would be heading in that direction as being sentient down the road. And so if you listen to people that are in the scientific and AI world, as they talk about demonic activity or talking to spiritual guides and all sorts of sort of mysterious things that sort of go on in the world of AI and high-end sort of computing.
So for our audience that isn't familiar, the Vedas are ancient Hindu Sanskrit texts, right?
Antediluvian, according to their history. Yeah.
So my question then is, if we're talking about consulting this, are we maybe to assume that this is some of the mystery Babylon stuff, like this is ancient, like the idea of quantums and some of the stuff they're doing at Cern is actually that they're trying to go back and access sort of ancient tech or ancient knowledge that existed before the flood and the golden age.
That's exactly what they're doing. The days of Noah, both before and after the flood, with Babel being after the flood.
Yeah.
And
I wanted to clarify that for people, because I know we haven't touched on.
And that's the connection to Shiva, right?
Yes. So that this.
Yeah, Shiva is the destroyer god that is connected to other gods of the pantheon and the end of days. And so, I was just noting that, Elon Musk, he said a few years ago that with AI, they were essentially summoning demons. So they're summoning some sort of intellectual beings. And it's not unusual that in that end of scientific discovery that they're receiving knowledge from whatever you want to call them, from whatever dimension that they might be in, that they believe that they're doing, that they're communicating with. And daemons is kind of the ancient word for it, and this word that they're starting to use. It's been transliterated into demons today, but the name that comes up in some of those conversations is the name Metatron. And Metatron is also the first part of the word is what's used quite a bit these days in the metaverse. It's used in what Facebook is now using as their companies. Again, you can tell who they are and what they are by the imagery that they do. Metatron is a character in the book of 3rd Enoch, antediluvian. And this is Enoch, son of Cain. This is Enoch, who's the creator of the 7 sacred sciences, and he becomes like a god because of all of his knowledge, and sort of akin to Thoth, how he is raised to godhood in the Egyptian pantheon. And this is the name of the individual that they say that they're talking to. And Enoch, when he's raised up to be like the Son of God, as it's talked about in 3rd Enoch, to angel status and even higher, they're saying that book of Enoch says that Enoch had his name changed to Metatron to reflect that. And so you've got, again, kind of this spooky kind of stuff that is just crazy and unbelievable that they're using with imagery and these names that come up out of history. So when we look at the imagery that comes out of Cern, Shiva we'll just touch on that one because we already talked about Shiva is one of the gods of the subcontinent of India's pantheon. And it's a significant god, a god of war, god of destruction, a destroyer of worlds. And so when you have this type of individual that is being sort of symbolized in this scientific research, you wonder what else is reflecting maybe Shiva that's in there. So you have, for example, the cosmic dance of Shiva that some of the employees are noted for, that they did as part of a celebration or a reopening of Cern a few years ago. And that's the dance of God. And what it is, Shiva is depicted in Indian history as within a burning halo or an orb, which gods are typically depicted in an orb. And Shiva is not only the god of destruction, but in this dance, it signifies that Shiva destroys to recreate a new world. And the level of the technology that is being developed there is absolutely sort of extraordinary in terms of what it's trying to do. And who knows, it may have access to weaponry and power that is really sort of unknown. Shiva has a direct connection as a destroyer god into an angel of the abyss. And that is Abaddon and Apollyon in Revelation 9 that's going to be released just before the midpoint of the last 7 years. And Abaddon in Hebrew means destroyer. It's not a name of an angel, it's a title. Apollyon, it means destroyer in Greek. Again, not a name, but a title for a destroyer god. In the book of Enoch, the destroyer god would be understood as Azazel. And Azazel is the host of the rebellious ones of the abyss put in there for their crimes. He is an angel that taught the art of war and the art of making weaponry to the antediluvian world. He's the one that is the scapegoat that the Book of Enoch lays all the sins of the antediluvian world, even though there's other ones that participated. He's the leader. He's one of the Satans. He isn't Satan as in the Satan, but he's a very important angel, and he's a war god that parades through the knowledge that merges with the seven sacred sciences of Enoch, the heavenly knowledge of the angels that is illicit and not permitted, or the knowledge of the gods and polytheism that goes to all civilizations around the world, and it merges to develop this technology that brings about the flood or the first apocalypse by water. And so it starts to bring in some more parallels in terms of the days of Noah that we talked about. Biblically, Azazel doesn't really show up in the King James Version, but the word scapegoat does. The second goat sacrificed on the Day of Atonement that's sent out into the wilderness, just as in a lot of polytheist legends, Azazel is hung in the wilderness. This is an unexplained sacrifice, and the word scapegoat goes back to the Hebrew word Azazel. And this is part of the laws that are given to Israel to do as part of their feasts of the Lord that they go through every year. And so we have this Azazel god that is the leader of those angels, who is the destroyer god, likely Abaddon and Apollyon, who's going to come out of the abyss just before the midpoint of the last 7 years. Now, Azazel was a watcher, but he will be degraded for his rebellion. So he, as a watcher, he would have been an Ophanim, which is one of four-faced angel like a cherubim, only one face difference because one of its faces is a cherubim. You have a cherubim as a watcher, you have archangels as a watcher, and you have the seraphim. And he's thought to have been a seraphim watcher who has been degraded to goat god status as the destroyer god, as in a satyr. Sa'ir, as it goes back to Hebrew, which means hairy, shaggy, goat god, ear watcher. That's the Hebrew word for watcher that's used 4 times in Daniel 4. And there's more than one of these degraded satyr gods that Israel is told not to worship as devil gods. And you take that back at satyr and it says goat god. And you also have the satyrs that are shown in end time prophecy in Isaiah 13 and Isaiah 34, one at the destruction of Babylon and one for the day of the Lord. And so these beings are coming back, these degraded goat gods. And the degraded goat gods in Greek mythology were known as very promiscuous, let's say, types of gods who were, I think, continuing to do things that, as part of the rebellious angels, they would have been degraded, not in the abyss because they didn't create the sexual crimes, but I think they disappear because after the flood, they begin to do some sexual crimes and will go to the abyss, just like the Baalim go to the abyss after the flood. So there are many goat gods that are listed around the world.
It makes me think about, we've done some episodes on Nate on Mount Hermon, and the Pan worship at Mount Hermon. And as Gary's pulling this thread, you have Azazel, who led the Watchers at Mount Hermon, And you have this cult of Peneus there. Jesus shows up on the scene too, and basically fires shots over the bow. Says, "This is mine now. This mountain belongs to me." The association there is fascinating, and I think too the idea that connecting Shiva with Azazel, and then realizing that and Apollyon, realizing the prophetic connection of that, and then this is the emblem. This is the mascot.
Yeah.
For per se for Cern.
Yeah, and at Mount Hermon, not only was there the Pan White House domed, so to speak, temple, but you also had the gateway to Hades there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right, which would be a portal, which is significant in occult history, that Jesus went to basically announce that I'm going to build my church and your rebellion is over. But Pan is only one of these god, right? So I think there's many of them. Bacchus is another one in Roman mythology. There are other ones like Baphomet, that the Templars worshipped. Mm-hmm. You have one called Innes in Greek mythology, another one called Phanos, just as fawns show up in fairy tales.
Yeah, Gary, we just interviewed a brother and sister whose their mom married a guy for like a year, and their stepdad was deeply involved in the occult. And he said the brother saw a Baphomet in his closet, and his dad was, a warlock, stepfather, and tied to these secret societies, they think. And I wonder if his father was specifically loyal to that goat god. Is that how down to the nuts and bolts of some of these occult practices get, where they actually know exactly who they're communicating with?
Well, within the occult societies, secret and other types of occult societies, it's populated by bloodlines. And the bloodlines that they keep their genealogies on go back to a specific Nephilim or Rephaim and a specific angel. So if I can use one as an example, and you could do a whole show on this one, is you have Vlad the Impaler, which is the character that Dracula is based on, and he's the typical Scythian, Tuatha Dé Danann, Rephaim after the flood. He has red hair, hazel eyes, pale skin, night operator because he's allergic to the sun. He's educated in the mystery school of Solomon, and he takes his bloodlines back to the Scythians and back through to a specific angel named Tamiel, whose name is listed a little bit differently in the Book of Enoch, but that would be Kazadea in the Book of Enoch. They are that specific.
Wow.
And Prince Charles III takes his lineage, and you can Google this and get the articles where it's written up. And many years ago, he said he takes his genealogy in part back to Vlad the Impaler.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's important. So they would be worshiping a specific god. Their scioning may have them, or grafting into bloodlines may have them worshiping a few more gods, and they may worship the overall pantheon, but there's one from a bloodline perspective that they would honor even more. And so the coat of arms would reflect that.
Like a Patreon god, essentially, right? Like the whole...
Yeah. Patreon god, absolutely. So there's another goat god in Greek history called Aegea Pan that's different than the other Pan. And then you've got a Celtic god that's named Cernunnos, which is a horn god as well of nature. So these are all nature gods. And Cernunnos is the same god that, because this goes back to the ancient Scythians migrating to England and carrying the same pantheon over there. They're just different vernacular names for the same kinds of gods, but there's one that's specifically that nails it. So just as you have these Indo-Aryans, and there's 4 different groups, and they're called many things: Tuatha Danu, the Datanu, the tribe of Anu, Aryans, they're called Rephaim, they're the same people. The Etruscans that were there before the Romans come to power, and when they set up Rome, they actually set up like a Pan temple that the Sibylline prophecies are going to inherit. But there's one other god that's in there that's really kind of interesting, and that is the god named Cern.
Really?
Exactly as that. And it was a stag god as well, another horn god. So this goes back to those gods of the early post-Diluvian world. You wanted to get in on that?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So CERN was named after this god, nothing to do with the science.
Yeah, it's not an acronym. Yeah, it's a convenient acronym.
Interesting.
So you have Cern and you have Shiva. Yeah. You have a destroyer god, and you have this horned god that predates the twins or the twin mythology of Rome, right?
What about where they build the facilities themselves? Is there any significance?
Well, there is. Apollo that you were talking about, which is connected to Apollyon in the Greek grouping of words, is called Etruscan god Apollo, which is the same god as Apollo in Sumerian mythology, and or Enlil as he can be described also, and also connected to Nergal, that's listed in the Bible as being one of the underworld and a war god. But specifically, as you get to the location and you start to work that back, you've got a location for CERN that's close to the Swiss, border, and it's in a town called Saint Genis-Poulier, and it is a temple that's been dedicated to Apollyon in its history.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's called in Roman, as opposed to French, the Apollyacum. And it derives from a Latin Apollyanu, which goes back to a Greek Apollyon in its etymology. So you have this place in Saint Genis-Poulier where you've got this temple of Apollyon, and it's like within a couple of kilometers of the CERN plant. And of course, that would have had a portal location associated with as an ancient holy site. They would have had ley lines crossing through for power, and they would have also had portals that would go to the underworld. And so Apollo is the Greek god of death and pestilence, and also a sun god, and also a son of a god, which is kind of like an antichrist kind of sort of scenario that goes. So do I believe that the abyss is located right below there? Probably not, but it has importance to the location of the abyss where Apollyon would be. So the abyss would be located in the earth, yes, as it's described, in the other world, netherworld, and when all the different places, different names it has around the world. So it'd be like Tartarus within Hades, right? The abyss within the underworld. So it's a prison that's located in Sheol, as it's described in Hebrew. But you have these portals that go into the underworld, in the center of the underworld, all over the world. They have different names in every different culture. So, even at Gilgal Raphaim, for example, you have like 100 different portals. And if people don't know what Gilgal Raphaim is, that means Wheel of the Giants. Wheel of the Giants. And it's right at the foot of Mount Hermon. So no coincidence there. That's also known as a few other names, but it all goes back to sort of the same kind of meaning. So one of the things that they're trying to do at CERN, I think, with quantum computing is to get into a different dimension. So the underworld occupies the same space, but in another dimension. And I think that one of the main things, not all of, but one of the things that they're trying to do is use this technology because they're celebrating the occult sciences. They're celebrating occult religion. They've earmarked it with Shiva, which, as we've talked about, is Azazel, Apollyon, Abaddon. I think they're trying to get into that dimension where the other world is and into the abyss and release their gods that were imprisoned, the gods who created the Nephilim before the flood, the Rephaim after the flood, the parent gods and the offspring gods, and let them out before the end time, because they want to bring about the end time, but on their own time frame and before, from a Christian perspective, which I am, the ordained time of God. And the Baalim, as I said, were offspring gods like Enlil and Enki, like Zeus and Osiris, as opposed to the parent gods, right, that were before the flood. So somehow they get killed or they're overthrown. I think they all go to the abyss. What's interesting, there's a passage in a book called Pistis Sophia. Sophia is the god of wisdom and the creator goddess of the 12 angels that they would say includes the God of the Bible. And it's the word that philosophy is based on, the love of wisdom, the love of Sophia, part of the 7 sacred sciences and all of the imagery that sort of goes in it. Sophia is part of being intermixed with AI and virtue in things that they're creating after her name and naming projects about her. But in there, in book 4, chapter 126, it talks about these 12 rulers that are in there from before the flood. And these are the 12 angels that she created, and I won't go through all of them, but these are the type of creatures that are in there, and they're going to lead out the scorpion beings out of the abyss when they do come out that have the ability to destroy the world. And these scorpion beings were created by Tiamat, the wife and consort of Apsu. And Tiamat was a dragon, serpent, Leviathan type of goddess, and she also created all sorts of other beings as well. Won't go into those, but the first one that's listed has a crocodile's face, and it has tail in his mouth. So you have that Oribus imagery and a crocodile, like the Ogdo gods in Egypt. You have the second one that has a cat's face, or can be translated as a lion's face. So you got all of these lion gaze like Sekhmet and Nergal and gods like that. You have the third one, a dog-faced one named Arkarok, and then you have in the fourth one a serpent-faced god. And you go all through these ones. You even have the Hydra ones at the end. These are the 12 rulers that were locked into the abyss, so they weren't killed. So I think the offspring gods went there as well. And these are the beings that they want to release into the world to complete the rebellion that they failed with in the first go around before the flood.
It's like a jailbreak.
Yeah.
It makes a ton of sense, right? You have all this Apollo imagery and branding and Shiva and Destroyer. You have all this Apollyon stuff. And then you realize that, quantums is really dimensional-based science. It sounds like they almost are making like a modern-day ziggurat.
Yeah. Well, and in the occult, ziggurats, towers, pyramids were similar kind of beings. Some say they were the same. They may be slightly different shape, but they were built for more than just what we're told that they're built for, right? They're not just tombs, and they probably were never tombs, but they were likely some sort of, as a lot of groups will speculate, some sort of power machine, energy machine. Some people think it had ability to go into different dimensions with the power and the locations that it would be located at. So if you roll forward to the days of Noah again, but after the flood, you have an individual that's named Nimrod, who is the first grand master of masonry after the flood and writes the first constitution. And he receives the 7 sacred sciences from Hermes, according to Freemasonry and Gnostics, and applies this ancient knowledge, builds Babel City and Babel Tower. Right? And he's in rebellion against God. And he's taken up the pantheon and religion that's before the flood. And he's building this tower. Now, and we get an understanding in that narrative that acting as one people to one language, anything they decide to do, they can do. So they have this knowledge that is explained through Gnosticism and Masonics, at least what they believe, that that Nimrod received this ancient knowledge. And Babel is understood in Hebrew as confusion of the languages, but we get the Babel story in many accounts around the world, from the Aztecs, the Quiché Maya, to the Sumerian account of Enmer-Akar and Eridu. And you also get an Armenian account, and you also get an interesting understanding through the Akkadians, which Nimrod is the patriarch thereof after he stays in Shinar or Sumer after the destruction at Babel. And they spell Babel, B-A-B-E-L. You can see it spelled that way coming out of Babylonian translations, but also Babalu, I-L-U. I-L-U and E-L are the same meaning, just a different transliteration in a different language. So in Hebrew, E-L is a god or angel or the god. And it can also mean mighty and powerful. So another transliteration as an example would be Al, just as Baal would be Lord God, right? In terms of his understanding, or master gods, some people translate it. So Babalu or Babel, out of the Akkadian version, you have the understanding of El as a god, and then Bab as the word translated out of Akkadian as gateway or portal. So you've got in the mythology of Nimrod that he's saying if God ever gets out of line again, he's going to climb the ziggurat, and he's going to find a way to kill the God of the universe, or if he threatens to bring about the flood or another flood, he's going to do the same thing. This Tower of Babel, nobody, I don't think, believes it could reach actually into heaven. But if he was building a gateway of the gods, portals into other dimensions, he may have planned, as Antichrist will do in the end time in Daniel 8:10, verses 8 to 10, will storm heaven, probably at the time of the angels at the war in heaven at the midpoint of the last 7 years, and probably through the ability to go through these portals and into heaven. And I think that's what he was trying to do. Two things is, one, if he had to, is to make war in heaven as an Antichrist type figure. And two, to go into the underworld and get more support by the gods that he's now worshiping.
We know that, just on a human level, you have these crime families that set up fronts, right? They have the front. Oh, this is our front business, but behind the scenes, they're actually really working their crime. We've had a lot of people come on our show and say even just the observatories in the world are all fronts for something else. There's like portals and there's other things that technology they're keeping hidden. Is CERN just a front for what they're really trying to do, that a majority of the people don't realize that there's probably a select number of people that actually understand what they're trying to do here? We've heard on the show there's portals in all places around the world, but what human beings seem to do is we have to use electronics and technology to pull off what some of the ancients could do. Is this just like a giant cell phone that we're building? But the ancients could telepathically communicate, but we have to build something with electronics to pull off what the ancients could do with stones and pyramids and
So the giants either had the technology both before and after the flood to do it, or they had different bodies before it got diluted through intermarrying with humans. Wouldn't prevent them to do it sort of naturally. So you would have to create that technology. You could make an argument that both are, might be the case, or one might be the case. So I think that's the case. And what you're talking about, the initiatory societies of the mafia, secret society with Godfather at the head, like a Godfather angel, right?
Yeah.
That sort of patriarchal sort of structure and understanding is they have fronts. And that's the standard MO in occult societies. So Freemasonry would be the one that most people would understand the best at the lowest level on the thelmic tree of organizational structures. They call that. It's like a world tree that has roots that goes down into the underworld and connects into heaven. That's the imagery they like to project on that. So Freemasonry is this organization that has 33-degree Scottish adepts at the top, and you have 3rd-degree Yorkite. But underneath, 32nd degree and lower and 2nd degree and lower respectively, they're learning stuff, but they don't know the true secrets, and they're designed there to be a front. So they show all of this great community work and effort so that they can work in secrecy. This is a standard operational tactic that is used. So one would expect anything connected to an occult society to do that, because it just allows them the freedom to do what they want to do. And I think that's exactly what is going on there. And again, people may not be maybe a bit surprised to see me connect the mafia with secret societies, but it's the same type.
It is.
And
it's the Cosa Nostra, right? They are a secret society of itself, because you don't talk about it. No one rolls, and no one tells the secrets and they have rituals and rites, right? I mean, they burn the saint in the hand. Very, very much is.
Very much so. And again, within polytheism, you have the micro dualism as you have the macro dualism. And in the micro dualism, you have black magic and white magic. You have good witches and evil witches. You have good wizards and bad wizards. You have good Nephilim and you have bad Nephilim. This is, again, a standard in their sort of belief system. They're working the same type of knowledge, maybe with a different agenda, is basically what they're doing.
Gary, I have a question you brought up a couple times, and we haven't touched on this, is the 7 sacred sciences.
Yep.
What are those, and what exactly is that?
They're the 7 liberal arts that are taught in universities today. And it was put into 7 disciplines by Enoch, son of Cain, according to the Gnostics. And so, I mean, people like astronomy would be one of them, right? You would have mathematics as another. You've got the first 3 that are going to form into philosophy that brings the whole sort of thing, like they have grammar and rhetoric, dialectics. And so anyways, there's 7 of them, but it's how they're developed and then that merging with the knowledge from the gods or the fallen angels that takes it to a level that we're just sort of catching up to today. And so that was developed into the mystery schools through the religions. The religions were set up so that it wouldn't be the Enochian mystical religion was set up so that the knowledge wouldn't go to the mundane, so the Sethites, and that you would have to learn it through a degree in a mystery system. And then you would have the religion that is using this knowledge, but it's being developed with something that they're going to call the mystery schools, the education where they educate only the elite, only the bloodlines, right? And you have that same thing that goes on to this day. And the secret societies come out of the mystery schools. So if you go to a university campus today, if it's of any age, it's all built in Egyptian, Sumerian, Greek, and Roman architecture. It has their gods plastered all over everything. They do everything by awarding degrees. And so you have this same type of sort of baby or early societies for a lot of people that they're bringing into their mysticism within the various houses that are set up on campus. Those are secret societies because they're initiatory as well. And the 7 sciences had an agenda that were established with it that is still being used today. So you have the agenda as being, first one is to lead people away from the God of the Bible. The second agenda is to not give God credit for anything. The third thing is to degrade God and insult God every step of the way in whatever you're doing. And then the fourth thing is to honor your own gods, which is still being done today. And so you have the birth of modern science in 1662 with the charter by King Charles II, as I recall, as opposed to the third that's just been crowned. With the Charter of the Royal Society, whom science pays homage today. And these were all Rosicrucians and Freemasons that were creating this new organization. And they called themselves the last of the sorcerers and the first of the scientists in that transition. And that was the beginning of modern science. And they've basically continued what they were doing beforehand in a way that we're going to see come to full fruition into the end time. So that's sort of the short story on the 7 sacred sciences and how it connects in.
It's fascinating, though, Nate. It is exactly what academia is doing, right? They are they're at enmity with God. They're trying to disprove God, lead people away from the God of the Bible.
Oh, yeah.
And literally distort the things that God has created and give glory unto another, like something else.
And anything in science can be discussed except for God creating anything.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right? That is... So
it's almost like the Tower of Babel story. It's like, you know, Christians kind of grow up thinking that was a one-time incident, but it seems like that rebellion has been going on since the dawn of time. It's just been rebranded, repackaged, and redistributed to the population under the term science. You know?
It's nothing new is under the sun, right?
That's right.
So it just continues to happen over and over and over again.
What if CERN isn't a portal? What if it's some sort of automatic writing, giant Ouija board type of technology where they're trying to get
like messages, right? Information.
Yeah,
it's
messages.
It's a cell phone. It's a weird cell phone.
They're trying to get, communicate and get what they need.
I think that would be another part of what they're trying to do. It's not that they're not communicating today with their spirit guides, whether they're demons or fallen angels, but because not all the fallen angels are in the abyss and not all of the demons are in the abyss, right? So there's ones that are still out, but they may be trying to find a way to communicate directly into the abyss. And what's interesting, there's a passage in Ezekiel 32 about the terrible ones that are talking to Pharaoh. And these terrible ones are Rephaim descended kings like the Asher and all the different names that they're going to list in Ezekiel 32 of like Elam would be another sort of Rephaim name and a patriarch of one of the Sumerian nations. And these are the terrible ones that did terrible things on earth and were slain and go into the sides of the abyss. So these are demonic, the worst of the demons that are in there, but not all demons are in the abyss. So the Bible tells us there's ability for them to communicate. I think in that, because they're talking with Pharaoh, who's another descendant sort of Rephaim king.
It goes back to our organized crime metaphor that like when the crime boss goes to prison, he still runs the organization.
Yeah.
He just has someone sort of by proxy does his stead outside, but he still is running it for all intents and purposes.
Yeah. So for me, it's they're going to get some information from them, but they've got other angels that can give them a lot of information, a lot of demons as well. But they may be trying to communicate with more things, and I don't know what those things are. But there's another thing that people need to be aware of, that what they're searching for, and we talked about it early on in the show. We talked about them searching for particles, and there's a specific one that they're searching for. And this is called the Atman particle, or the Atma particle. And it's talked about in, if you haven't guessed it, the Upanishads and the Vedas. And it is a very, very interesting particle. It's invisible. So even though they're going subatomic, they can't detect this particle. It's that hard to find. And it is a particle that they believe goes to the core of establishing godhood. And in their belief, and just as Satan through the serpent was trying to provide a form of godhood in the physical world for Adam and Eve, just eat this fruit from the tree of good and evil, he was basically saying you can be like God. And in polytheist belief system, immortality is required. And the other thing is unlimited access to knowledge, and unlimited knowledge because of a God, you would be all-knowing, right? Just as the all-seeing eye is all-knowing. And so they need to provide that. So you're going to see this technology in part that is coming out of Cern that's going to merge into, because you've got AI, quantum computing, all sorts of other things that's going to merge into other parallel lanes of technology and eventually into the beast system and the mark of the beast as a source for this knowledge, and will be delivered, according to the Davos people who report to the Committee of 300, this will be delivered through the healthcare system, because people will demand that this technology that will be done all in a digital sort of basis can cure pestilence and give you immortality and that connection to this knowledge. So this Atma particle, it's rather interesting. It's invisible, but what it does do is it merges with particles that they can measure, or at least, and whether maybe other ones that they're still finding that they could actually find and measure. And they believe that this is the particle that has the main essence of man in it, or what man can become. They believe that it is the knowledge of the universe that is accessed through this particle, and this knowledge through quantum entanglement is instantaneously sent around the whole physical universe ongoing, and they're trying to find this particle to tap into. So that would be another thing that I think that they are trying to...
Some kind of tree of life, or...
like tree of knowledge, good and evil, meets the hive mind or something.
Yeah, it definitely meets the hive mind, no doubt about that. And, just as down a different sort of rabbit hole is that, one of the things that the Israelites used against the Rephaim and the hybrid giants in the Exodus wars is hornets. And in the occult, with the hive mind that you're talking about, it's a trait that they believe that they inherited through their gene of Isis, their bloodlines, that is a type of telepathy that allows them to communicate. And they try and use that to harness their knowledge and strength to fulfill certain agendas, whatever those are that are on their mind to do, that they still believe they still have some of that today. And they have all of these bees, and sometimes they're sort of allegorized as this kind of fleur-de-lis type of thing that they have in their emblems, right? But it's an allegorical reference to the bee and to the hive mind, and that the hornets were the enemies of the bees, and that they would just drive the Rephaim crazy, into panic, that they couldn't think, that they couldn't communicate. And so it's interesting that the Bible has that as one of the main things on how God delivered up these giants to the Israelites, because they had no defense against it. They had no defense against it. They had no defense against it. yeah, this knowledge of the world is that
All right, my friends. Sorry about the technical difficulties. Haven't used this system in quite some time, and it's called BeLive.tv. And what it allows me to do is to broadcast into several platforms at one time. All right, my friends. I want to welcome Ashley Allen, Donna, Randall, all y'all guys in the comment box. Y'all make this show, and I want to thank you. You know, my friends, I said at the beginning of the show that I would like to pray, start this show off right. So let's do that. And then we're going to get into Warren von Braun, the Nazis, and all kinds of cool stuff. All right, my friends. Father Yahweh, Father, we, Father, offer ourselves to you. To build with us and to do with us is thy wilt. Relieve us of the bondage of self, that we may do thy will and not our own will. And take away our difficulties, that our victories may bear witness over the people we will help today. Father, there's people out here that just heard your name for the first time tonight. Yahweh. These are the ones that need to be healed, and these are the ones that need to see your momisment power. Your momisment power, Father. These are the ones that need to see it. And I ask you to bless them all, Father. Amen, brothers and sisters. Amen. All right. All right, my friends. I got quite a good show for you tonight. We're going to be talking about Warren von Braun. All right. He was a Nazi. He was a Nazi SS officer. He built the first V2 rocket. He built the first V2 rocket in his 20s. The man was a genius, my friends. The man was a genius. But you notice on his tombstone, it says Psalms 19:1. Why would a rocket scientist put that on his tombstone? So, and in Psalms 19:1, by the way, the firmament is Yahweh's handiwork. The firmament is Yahweh's handiwork. See, my friends, Warren von Braun knew about the firmament. You open up your Holy Bible, it says firmament, but nobody knows what the firmament is. Man, my friends, I'm here to testify. It's to protect us from different realms and different dimensions that are above. The firmament is the most overlooked word in our Holy Bible, my friends. It's the most overlooked word. All right, I'm gonna jump pictures real quick. If we can find this pic, if I can throw it up on screen. My friends, what you're looking at right there is the United Nations. What is the United Nations doing with the flat Earth map? It's right there in front of you. That's the UN. That's the flat Earth map. Hello, they don't hide things. It's up to us to comprehend. It's up to us to seek, my friends. And this is what I have sought out. There's no way that this is a coincidence. You know, they're telling you what's about to happen. And we're about to go to have war. I'm not going to hold anything back. We're about to have war. People are dying over there. And people just think it's a joke. Seeing them blowing up the tanks and this and that, and it's very sickening stuff. We just had a comment from Randall Hill. He says, "Yes, we are, Ashley." Let me see what Ashley had to say right here. Well, yes. Well, it's fig tree generation is what we're entering, the fig tree generation. You know, my friends, I want to say this. I'm being led to say this. Your heart puts out a hertz, a frequency, a vibration. All right? So does your brain, but not like your heart. All right, my friends? It's your biggest organ. Just learning all kinds of new things about the heart. But for a fact is, it puts out a hertz. Animals put out a hertz. Plants put out a hertz, but not like the human heart. See, when you're praying, you want to connect your hertz frequency into Yahweh's frequency. And how you do that is you got it in your brain right here. When you're praying, you got it in your brain. You're taking your brain and you're entering it into your heart, right? And this is where you get the love and all that satisfaction from Yahweh. Let me see. We just had a new comment. Yes, you know, the fig tree generation. Gary, he goes into depth about it, and definitely in the birth pains. Definitely, sister. Well, my friends, that is the United Nations. That's the flat Earth map. What's going on? Hello. I'll tell you what I think's going on. They're lining they've been jockeying for position for a long time now. All right. There can only be one. Like the Highlander movie. Oh, you know what? Right? That's why David had to cut their heads off. Goliath. You know, it's the only way they can be killed. Is, you know. But anyways, there can only be one. And that's what they're competing for. I got some more pics I like to throw up on the screen. And see here. If you don't have Gary Wayne's book, my friends, Genesis 6 Conspiracy Part 2, it's a must-have. I know it's a big book. You know, it's a very, very big book. But it's broken down into small chapters where you can go back to it. You know what I mean? You don't have to bust all your brain cells. And it's really, I like the way Gary written this book. They are all bad, Randall. They're all bad. Yeah. Over 7,000 times the name of Yahweh was replaced with Lord and God. See, Lord and God is a title, not a name. Our Creator name is Yahweh. Hallelujah. Yes, my friends, our Creator's name is Yahweh. He wants to be called by his name. And that's what this program is all about, is proclaiming Yahweh's name. See, it's been hidden from us, this knowledge, because in 1611, King James took out the name of Yahweh, added God and Lord. These are titles, not names, right? In 1611, King James did this, and so did Bacon. Some say Bacon is really Shakespeare, but that's another program. But my friends, what I'm trying to get through tonight is we need to be praying. We got to go into prayer. All right. We have the authority. We have this authority. Yeshua told us, Yahweh tells us we have the authority. Right? All right, my friends. I'm just so thankful to be back on air again and be able to broadcast to you guys. I was shut down for quite some time through BeLive.tv. It's a network. They shut me down. Right? And there are lots of problems. I get shut down on YouTube all the time. Once I reached 5,000 subscribers and I got shut down. I reached 1,000, I got shut down. Another 1,000, I get shut down. And now I'm back up to 700. But we are also on Rumble. And I got some really good unedited videos of Gary and I on Rumble. So please go over to Rumble and check out our videos. All right, my friends. Tonight, I'm just do a little recap. What is the UN doing with the flat Earth map as its logo? Warren von Braun, on his tombstone, has out of Psalms 19:1, the firmament is Yahweh's handiwork. Nobody's getting past that firmament. Hillary Clinton says, I'm going to break the ceiling. He ain't breaking no ceiling because that's Yahweh's firmament and it's going to stand forever. Amen, brothers and sisters. Amen.